When I say, who's the master? You say, no.
What is up, guys? Showing up the King here, back with another video. So, I have to go on a brief rant. So, I'm back from vacation. Luckily, I left last Saturday, and I'm actually getting back I left last Sunday, and I just got back literally like an hour ago. And the first thing I did was make sure I'm bringing you guys a proper review for Darling and the Franxx episode 16, because I love you guys and I love this show. So you gotta do what you gotta do. And again, this episode was so fantastic. It was so much world building again from Studio Trigger that this is going to take a lot for me to actually go through this. This is going to be another one of my longer videos, but I hope you guys will stick around and watch the entire thing, because I have a lot of thoughts on this episode. This is actually going to be more of a review slash theory video, because there was so much information that we learned from this actual episode that it's gonna take a lot to break down and actually get into the nitty gritty of what actually took place in this episode. Because honestly, if you just watch this for entertainment value alone, I can guarantee you missed out on a lot of important information. But that's what your boy Showing Up is here for. I'm gonna help you guys figure it out. We're gonna figure it out together. I'm gonna give you my thoughts. I definitely want to hear from you guys so that we can kind of figure out what Studio Trigger is trying to do to us with this freaking show. So without further ado, let's get into it. All right, so what I'm going to do here is that since there was so much information given at the very, very beginning of the actual video, and where a lot of my theories are going to be coming from, I'm going to save that portion of that video towards the end. And again, because the very end of this episode ties back into the very beginning of the episode, which also ties into the brand new opening that we got, which I really loved. The thing that I loved about it most is that they kept the same opening song and they just changed the animation just to go on to the next level. I really love the opening of the first 15 episodes of Darling and the Franxx, and I'm really happy that they didn't switch it up like they do in normal anime. So what they did this time around is they kind of went the Dragon Ball route, where Dragon Ball never switches the beginning theme, and they just switch the end theme. So that's kind of what they did with this scenario, where the ending theme has changed, the beginning theme has been the same, except they changed the animation. And even in the animation, they spoil. I won't say spoil you, but they actually gleam a lot of information that I'm not going to talk about right this second, but I'm going to get to that at the end of the video. So let's jump into the review of Darling and the Franxx episode 16. So I got my notes here, so if you see me looking down, that's why, because again, it was so much information that they gave us this episode. I had to write it down just to make sure that I didn't forget anything, because again, I usually do this stuff free flow. I don't like to do a lot of editing. I like to just go off the top of the head. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about is the need for keys. So at the beginning of the episode, we have the hive mind. They're talking about everything that's been going on. You kind of see that the series itself has moved on 30 days into the future, and what's going on now is that the kids are all still in the same building that they have always been in, but after the giant hand from episode 15 destroyed it, now they have limited electricity, limited food, water, etc. So now it's a weird situation, because what's going on is that Papa has pretty much cut off all ties of communication to the pilots, and we don't know why. Now, again, here's where some of the theories are going to start to come in, but essentially the kids have been on their own for a month. They've been getting rations to them once a week, which is food, and they're also running out of clean water, and again, there have been zero communication going on between the adults that have been working with this, and we're working with the kids this entire time, and everything's just been going along smoothly. Now, the attitudes of everybody has completely done a 360. 02 and Hero are doing great. Their relationship is developing steadily. Ichigo and Goro seem to be fine. It doesn't look like there's any animosity between the two of them. You know, there's a little bit of tension going on in other areas, but I'll get into that as well. But all in all, the kids are working well as a unit, and they're actually enjoying the downtime. Now, that also goes into kind of the theory that I'm thinking is actually going on in this actual story. So, let's get into that. So, one of the main reasons why I think Papa is actually not communicating with the team is one or two reasons. Number one, in which I think is probably the more probable of the two, is that this is a test to see if these kids can survive on their own. So this entire time they've been provided with hot water, food, water, clothing. Everything has pretty much been done for them. Training, what they know, their knowledge has been very limited. They've had access to these books, but they never really had to use them because, again, there was never a reason to. And you find that out later on in the episode where they're deciding to make. They decide, hey, if no one's going to come and say anything to us, maybe we need to start doing things on our own. And they start going fishing and they start reading books that had information on how to cook. Cookbooks from, the old days. So, again, why is Papa doing this? What is going on? Why does he not want them to communicate? And the only thing that I can think of at this point in time is just a simple fact that I think he wants to see, can these group of kids either survive without parental help, and can they move on and evolve, so to speak, to see if humanity is going to continue? Because think about it. The only other humans that we see are all old. They all have these pacemaker hearts in their chests, and they're all in these highs, but none of them are actually living productive lives like they used to back in the day. So it also kind of led me in a little bit of a slant to think, are these kids, is there a reason why the Franxx are always piloted with a boy and a girl? Is this a situation where Papa's trying to see, are these kids going to naturally procreate and become and make more kids for the next generation? Are these kids the group of kids that are going to repopulate the earth? Like, are they going to be the one that start new life? And they're trying to just see, is that going to be cultivated? Are they going to get past the limitations? Because later on in the episode, during a bath scene, which is probably also world building and also a little bit of slice of life and also a little bit of Ichi moments going on as well. You have the girls in their obligatory pond taking a bath and washing each other's hair, but there was actually an interesting development in this actual scene is when 02 was getting her hair washed by Miku, and Miku, they turn around, they're playing in the water, and then 02 is like, oh, I'm going to wash her hair. And as she's going through her hair, she notices there's like a bunch of white strands in her hair, gray hair. So, from the looks of it, it looks like Miku is probably no more than, I don't know, 15, 16 maybe. I think these kids are probably aged at, if you look at it. So it's actually very weird to see a child, a preteen or a teenager, having gray hair. So is this kind of one of those statements where the accelerated aging that we've heard about and the little rumblings in the previous episodes, why, the kids never become adults? Because, again, why are these other people with the little pacemakers, are they all probably of that same age, but they just had that rapid accelerated growing? So that was one thing that I noticed. I was like, aha, that's a bookend. Let me see what's going on with that. So we heard about, we saw that with Miku. We also heard where Hiro and 02 was talking earlier in the episode where Hiro mentioned that Goro had been sick a week earlier, and he just attributed that to the child virus. So Goro, but then it looks like from all accounts that Goro looks fine now. But again, there's another moment there, and there was the other pilot, the one that we all believe is a lesbian. Excuse me, I don't remember her name, but she had already been getting over a sickness as well. So that's kind of when 02 kind of checked around, was like, okay, good, you're good now. So it looks like all these kids are having these little bit of issues back and forth. And again, I think it's all a process of, none of them have been getting these injections. None of them have been getting any sort of medicine in their last 30 days. So I'm generally thinking that Papa's testing this group of kids to see, Can they survive without their yellow blood cell injections? You know, can they survive as a humanity? Like, will their relationships build and get stronger? Because we saw what happened with Hero and Zero Two when their relationship developed and they were able to go into the Stringia super mode. Maybe Papa's trying to see if he can let these other kids develop their relationships. Maybe they can take their Franxx to the next level because they're going to be needed in the next battle. So there's a bunch of little theories going around with what's actually going on with this whole letting them be on their own. Because there's also other little things where at the beginning when they're eating the supplied food, they're praying to Papa, and you know how they're praying to a god, they're praying to Papa. But then later on in that episode, after they cook their own food and they do their own fishing and they do their own making the salads and the stew, it's time to do prayer again. And then this time they don't actually pray to Papa. So it's actually developing as well. And that was kind of my second theory is this a situation where, again, which is less likely, I thought maybe it was a situation where they would be like, hey, we're not going to follow your rules anymore. We're going to do things our way and just kind of see if they'll rebel and go against the system and try to, you know, do like an uprising and, you know, go against the power and escape with their Franxx and kind of go against everything. It's probably less likely that scenario. But again, I just thought it was very interesting that during that second dinner when they're eating their food that they cooked, that they decided not to actually mention Papa in prayer. So I also don't want to skip over a couple of other small details. Again, when I first watched the first time, I was kind of like, oh, and you know, that's actually more about Kokoro and Mitsuru's kiss. So Mitsuru goes to Kokoro and asks her to cut his hair. And again, Mitsuru is actually doing better now. His attitude has kind of changed once he learned that Hiro was he didn't remember their promise. So it wasn't like he intentionally forgot. It was just that he didn't know because he had his mind wiped. So Mitsuru was kind of feeling bad about himself because he's like, hey, this guy had nothing to do with what was going on, and I was holding and harboring all these evil feelings towards him this entire time when he didn't even know what was going on. So I think Mitsuru went to Kokoro with the guise of, hey, can you cut my hair? But I think he actually has been developing feelings for Kokoro, and he actually looks to her as a sounding board, as someone to go talk to. Kind of like how I talk to my wife. And, you know, if I have a bad day at work or if I'm having any issues, and, you know, my wife is that sounding board that I go to in order to talk to kind of work things out in my head so that, you know, it always ends up making me feel better. So in that instance, that's kind of the same thing that I felt that Mitsuru was doing with Kokoro. So, you know, Kokoro cuts his hair, and, you know, I honestly didn't like the haircut, but she thought he looked handsome, so whatever. So during that moment, we get the Kokoro Mitsuru kiss. Now, at first, I was like, "Oh, that's it. That's going to be the cover of the actual video. That's the stamping moment of this actual episode." But I was wrong. I was so wrong, and we're going to get into that towards the end of the video. Stick with me, guys. Stick with me. So they kiss. You know, it was kind of like that Ichigo Hero kiss, though, because I think that's the first time Mitsuru has ever been kissed. So when she kisses him, he doesn't actually kiss her back. I don't think he didn't even really know how to. You know, Kokoro gets extremely embarrassed and she ends up running off. And, you know, they don't really touch on it anymore. Later on at the end of the episode, after they catch all the fish, it doesn't look like they're awkward around each other anymore. It looks like it was kind of like, okay, that happened, you know, we'll deal with it later. Now, we also have a moment, and again, excuse me, I can't remember his name right now, but Fatso. We'll call him Fatso for right now. And again, you can tell the least two knowledgeable characters are the ones who I probably think will end up. If anybody ends up dying, it's going to be those two. So he's not actually eating anything, and he says he's on a diet. I don't understand how they know what a diet is, but again, I digress. I'm not going to get caught up in the minutia of all the little details that don't make sense. So that little drama that they created, I don't know if we're going to get much of a payoff on it because it doesn't really make sense. Is he shamed of himself being a bigger guy, and what he's trying to do is impress Kokoro by being skinny? Maybe she thinks that that's the reason why Kokoro doesn't want to ride with him anymore, is because he was fat. So maybe he's trying to do a diet in order to impress her. We don't know if maybe he's sick and he can't eat, or we don't know what's going on with that. Like my brain started to trail off so far and deep into that, because they actually gave it a significant amount of time on that storyline. Like you saw at the very beginning, he wasn't really eating the little goulash or whatever that they had prepared, and you see it again later on in the episode where, you know, they're fighting over the fish and he doesn't eat it again, and then, you know, his buddy says, "Hey, I've been noticing that you've been eating your food and throwing it back up. What's going on with that?" You know, we all know what that means, but I don't know if they're going to spend too much time on that actual storyline. I don't know if we're going to get a payoff on that later on down the line, because again, this show has so many different storylines going on right now. My fear is that towards the end of the episodes, we only have like 6 or so episodes left, so I don't know if we're going to get a full detailed explanation on how everything is going on. So that might be a story that gets thrown to the wayside. That's kind of how this anime works in general. Some things get left off. So let me look through my notes, make sure I didn't forget anything. All right, so let's get to the nitty gritty. The very bookend of this episode, and the very, very beginning of this episode, that all combine together as to the theories that I want to get together for you guys. So let's talk about that opening. So in the opening, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually I'm going to go to a photo of what I'm talking about right now, and then I'll come back and then we'll discuss. All right, so here is the first photo that I wanted to talk about. This is actually the main photo that I wanted to talk about. So here we go. In this episode, we learn about 3 major things, and this was actually a photo that I snapped from the actual opening of the actual episode. And that's what I was talking about when I was looking at things and saying that they gave you a lot of details in a brand new opening. So at the very beginning of the episode, we find out that Hive was talking about, well, Nest, I think that's what they call it, Nest. They were talking about sending emissaries to talk to her. Talking about key things like the Calaxosaur princess that we learn about at the end of the episode. We also hear about something that they're creating called herringhorn. So I actually looked it up, and herringhorn is actually from Norse mythology, and it's actually the name of a Norse ship from the god Balder. And it's actually very interesting because it's known as the greatest ship of all time in Norse mythology. So I was thinking about that as they were talking about it, and I looked it up, and then I was like, great ship. I was like, ship. I was like, Frank. And then as I was processing the information, I noticed at the beginning of the actual episode, what do you see here in the background? Right here, right behind the Calaxosaur princess, you see a massive Frank. And that can't be a coincidence. So what I'm thinking is that what they were talking about with the herringhorn is this Frank you see here in the background, and that they're creating this giant Frank. I don't know what's going to pilot it, but I think that's what they're working on as part of their plan to restore humanity. Now, what that has to do with this Calaxosaur princess that we actually see in this photo as well, we're going to get to that next. Now, the reason why I'm actually talking about this, because you'll see at the very end of the episode, you see in this dungeon area, there is a Calaxosaur female that's in this dungeon. It looks like this actually might be in the Great Crevasse, and you see this giant Calaxosaur that looks like either a giant snake or a giant dragon that's curled around, and then you also see a throne, and on this throne, the throne actually looks like DNA strands if you actually look very closely at the picture. And on this throne is someone that looks just like 02. And again, it also made me think, I'm like, if 02 is 02, what if this other woman who we see here in this photo is 01? That is the actual theory that I'm trying to talk about here. So is she the original Calaxosaur princess? And then that just actually just was like, once I saw that moment, it was just like, wow. Like, it just, like, my brain just exploded. Because I was just like, this is just a lot of information to process. So, again, I just wanted to show you guys this image right here. Let's get back to the regular review. Alright guys, so now we're back, and we just saw the photo, and now you kind of understand why I saved it to the end of the video to talk about it. So just a few more things, and then we're going to wrap this up. So as you can see from the actual photo, that there is a lot going on with this Calaxosaur princess that we don't know about. I'm thinking that 02, it's probably either a clone or her sister, and either there was like a trade, or from better guesstimations that it was probably that the human group stole 02 from 01, and then maybe they were sisters and she got stole at birth, and that's why when you see 02, they were studying her, they were seeing exactly what made her tick. Maybe they were trying to develop, that's how they develop weapons to actually deal with the actual Calaxosaur menace that they're actually seeing. And again, my prediction is that I'm honestly thinking that maybe the Calaxosaurs are not the bad guys, and the humans themselves are the actual bad guys, namely the higher ups in the nest, like Hive, the people of the robots that are up above. What are they actually planning, especially with the herringhorn ship that they're creating, which I think is a giant Franxx, as you saw from that photo. That's what I think is actually going on. But again, this is why I love this show, because again, whenever they give you an answer, they actually give you 15 more questions. So that's actually a good thing. The only fear that I have, and it's the only reservation that I have right now, is that with so few episodes left, I really want them to be able to flesh out these stories and make sure that we get a proper answer to a lot of these questions that we have. Namely, where does 02 come from? We saw what she looks like as a kid. How does she get that humanoid form? Is it like makeup? Is it like DNA splicing? We don't know. Is this a situation that happened after... shortly after they wiped Hero's memory? Who is this other Calaxosaur princess? Because they also mentioned the fact that they don't need 2 keys, and that's actually very, very important, because what I think they're talking about with 2 keys is 01 and 02. So for right now, that other Calaxosaur princess, I'm going to call her 01 for the time being, because to me, that's who she is. That's 01. We already have 02. So for the time being, that's what we're going to go with. So out of the 2 of them, I think that they're trying to say, hey, we're going to send an emissary to come and talk to you about this and see if we can come out with a deal. But just keep in mind, we don't need you. We already have one of the keys. We don't need 2 keys. So one of you is expendable. So again, I think there's going to be a lot of surprises they're going to have in store for us. And unfortunately, I don't think that this is going to have a happy ending for a lot of us, because towards the end of the episode, Hero does that big mistake where he says, we'll be together forever, and then it's like this ominous like pan from them as they're like leaving the thing. You go off and find out about 01. So I don't think it's going to be a happy ending, folks. But again, like I said, those are my theories. There's my review. The review for episode 16 is a fantastic. It's a 10 out of 10 again. Just the world building alone, just the more questions we have. We did get a couple of answers, but again, this show's just so good. Studio Trigger, you guys complete me. Let me know what you guys think in the comments section below. Let's get discussing. Let's start theorizing. If I need to make another video, I will, so we can talk about this more. If not, I'll see you guys again next week for another episode of Darling and Franxx.